Welcome to Conscious Quest, the LA-based podcast where we aim to stay conscious about everything current. Welcome back, everyone. You are listening to Conscious Quest, the podcast for seekers. I'm one of your hosts, Sarah Parlow, and I am going to be hosting solo today while Rishi is out riding motorcycles, one of his favorite things to do. But never fear, I have set up an incredible guest to be with us today. She is a good friend of mine. Her name is Aastha Lal. And before I have her jump in, I'm going to do a quick bio to tell all of you about her. And let's just say that Aastha was born and raised in New York City, and she has performed stand-up on hundreds of stages across Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, and Hong Kong. She is also one of the hosts of the popular podcast, The Modern Yogi, and the link for that will be below. This spiritual podcast goes verse by verse through the famous book, the Bhagavad Gita, and it breaks it down in an informative and fun manner. Aastha, I don't think you can do anything without it being fun. Welcome to Conscious Quest.
Thank you for having me, Sarah.
Oh my God.
Great. I mean, I'm super excited. I love everything that this podcast is about. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. So what would you like our listeners to know about you first and foremost? Tell us about you.
Ooh, I think, wow, there's so much, but I think the two great loves of my life are spirituality and stand-up comedy. And those are the things that in any conversation, if any tenet of either of those is brought up, I think that's what sets my soul on fire in a good way, not in a bad way. But yeah, those are the two things that I love. I've been doing comedy for a very long time, since 2010. So almost 14 years. And I've also been practicing bhakti yoga. It's like a type of Eastern spirituality for almost like more, there's a little bit more than that. And so those are the two things that I love. And as a comedian, I want to find a way to combine my two loves, spirituality and comedy, and make people laugh and learn at the same time. So that's what I'm working on now.
I love that so much. And you are accomplishing that mission beautifully. You brought up bhakti yoga. I want to just touch on that really quick. For everyone who doesn't know, it's not like the forms of yoga that we do in the studio. It is a type of lifestyle. It is a philosophy. It goes back thousands of years to ancient India, and it is the yoga of devotion, is it not, Aastha?
Yeah, absolutely. So yoga actually means union. It's a Sanskrit word that means union, when you connect to something higher than yourself. And bhakti means love. And so what you're doing, and what the purpose of our lives, according to bhakti yoga, is to develop that beautiful, loving relationship with something higher than ourselves. And it should be fun. It should be loving. It should, whatever you believe in, whether it's God or the universe or the creator or your hamster, it doesn't really matter, right? But that what the point is to develop something that is beautiful and personal to you, and that's bhakti yoga.
And I think at the core of any loving relationship, it's about reciprocation, correct? So
Correct.
It's learning how to have that sort of beautiful yin and yang and that flow between two entities. And if we can model that in one space to our highest spiritual, being, then we can model it here on earth with each other. So
absolutely. Beautifully said, Sarah. Beautifully said.
I've been practicing a long time, so fantastic. So now you have this podcast called The Modern Yogi. And so tell us, what makes a modern yogi, and what inspired you? And you have two other hosts on your podcast. You have Priya Darshani.
Yep.
And Shamali, how do you say her last name? Mujan?
Yeah, Mujan, yeah.
Mujan.
But
okay.
yeah, Shamali and Priya, just for simplicity's sake, Priya was the one who was like, hey, this is something that we have to do. So just to give a little bit of context, every sort of tradition has their holy book, right? Islam has the Quran, Judaism has the Torah, Christianity has the Bible. In a lot of Eastern spirituality, that holy book is called the Bhagavad Gita. So that's what they put their hand on in a court of law in India. It says, I will not tell a lie. So that is kind of the big book in Eastern spirituality. And so I never really understood this book I tried many, many times to read it. And when I had a mentor explain it to me and go through the entire book to me, I was like, wow, this book essentially has all of the answers of life that I have been looking for, that I have been searching for. And so it has been so helpful to me just to open any page of this book and figure out the answer that I'm looking for in that particular day. There's actually a saying that they say, if you have a problem, you open any page randomly and then you'll have your answer there. And what's unique about this book is that it's not just a bunch of fables and stories that we can learn lessons from. And that format is fantastic. But what's interesting about this format is it's just one long conversation between two people, Krishna and his cousin Arjuna. And Krishna represents sort of this God figure, and then Arjuna kind of represents us. Arjuna is having this existential crisis where he's asking all of these crazy questions, things that we all ask when we are having existential crises. You know what I mean? Like things like, who am I? What is the purpose of my life? What am I supposed to do here? How come I have good days? How come I have bad days? How do I control this monkey mind of mine? And so he's asking all of these questions during this crisis, and Krishna is answering all of them. And the answers in this book are so beautiful and has changed my life so much. So when Priya brought up the idea to, hey, let's go verse by verse and help people through this book, I was like, absolutely, absolutely, because this book has changed my life in so many ways, and I want to be part of changing people's lives. Because this book has so many gems of wisdom, I just want to be part of that process for somebody else.
Amazing. And so I would like to note that the Bhagavad Gita is a very old book, too. It is older than the Bible by like a few thousand years, to the best of my recollection. And not only does it go into the breadth of answering the issues around the human condition, but it also gives actionable steps that people can take in their own lives that still hold true today in order to get in alignment with higher universal spiritual principles. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think the most important word that that would use, and it correlates to your podcast as well. It talks about a lot of God consciousness. Like, how do we become conscious of God on a day-to-day basis? How do we develop that beautiful, loving relationship with God? Whatever you want to call him, doesn't matter. That's your personal relationship. But how do we become more conscious of God and conscious about also serving the people around us on a daily basis? And so I think the most fulfilling life is when you help other people, and this book shows you how to do that, and also how to develop that bond that is perhaps the most beautiful bond that you can make between you and your personal creator.
Incredible. What I love also about Modern Yogi is you started the podcast with a chant. And so can you tell us about that chant and also the significance of chant and sound vibration in the Vedic philosophy?
Oh yeah. So the every episode we start with a prayer, and a prayer to our teachers. What's interesting about Eastern philosophy, and you've seen it with like Mr. Miyagi and the Karate Kid, like there's always a guru, there's always a mentor, right? Because I think every single one of us needs some sort of teacher out there to show us the right path, to answer our questions, to hold us accountable. And I think that every path that you're trying to follow, when you're trying to learn knowledge, having a mentor or having a guru is so important. And what's interesting is that this particular chant is for our teachers, and so it's kind of a prayer of gratitude. It's like, thank you so much for lighting the way and showing me the breadth of knowledge that's in this tradition, and I humbly offer my obeisances onto my teachers. And so I think having that mood before we read this sacred text really kind of puts us in the right mind frame, where we're really acknowledging, in a mood of gratitude, everyone that has come before us who has shown the importance of this knowledge to us.
That's so beautiful. If you would like, perhaps our listeners would love to hear that prayer.
Oh my!
If it's not much.
you know, there's a reason, and this is why I want all of your listeners to check out the podcast, because I always make Shamli and Priya sing it, because they're way better singers than me.
Okay.
So I'm not gonna do it, because I want you to listen to the podcast. Their voices are angelic. And the way
Oh,
that I always read the English translation. So, so I want you to listen at least for the first 10 minutes of any podcast, Modern Yogi podcast. Just listen for their voices, and I know they'll do a way better job than I will do. But yeah,
okay. So we have a teaser there. We have a little clincher for people to
yes,
motivation,
their
call to
their
action.
voices, yeah, their voices are angelic, and if you close the episode after that, I don't even mind. But just listen to their voices.
It's worth a listen, everyone. So please tune into Modern Yogi. So are there certain first of all, I love the way how you inject a lot of humor and lightheartedness into your way of interpreting the Bhagavad Gita, you personally, Asta, but then also all three of you did an excellent job of relating it to life, to modern life, and ways that this is applicable and how it works.
Mhm.
So, how, is that all just organic between the three of you? I mean, how did you practice that? I mean, it's just so effortless when the three of you are on.
No, I appreciate that, and that's one of the biggest compliments you can give us because we do everything on the fly and we do everything from the heart. I think we infuse our personalities. I like humor. I think of everything in terms of humor, and so I don't know why they brought me on the podcast, but it's probably to add that levity because it is a more serious book. Like you're talking about life here, right? And so
Yeah.
I think that dynamic has been very natural between us, and we try to make it as relatable as possible to the average listener. We talk about everything. We talk about breakups. We talk about our monkey mind. We talk about relationships with our parents. We talk about God. Like the last episode that we had, episode I think it's 71. We were talking a whole discussion about, dumb prayers that we've had throughout our life. You know what I mean? And when I say dumb, I mean like, what did you pray for when you were 5? What did you pray for when you were 14? What did you pray for? You know what I mean? And like I say dumb as in like, did we pray for a tricycle? Did we pray for, passing chemistry? It's like, what are the dumb prayers that you've had throughout your life? And what actually the whole point of that conversation was that none of these prayers are actually dumb because we're forming that connection. Every time that we talk to God, we're forming that connection, and that's all he cares about, right? And so we have these interesting discussions. We talk about our life, and we talk about our past, and we talk about our exes, and we talk about our family, and we talk about how to make all of this stuff that we're learning practical and relatable for for modern day life. And I think that's the most important thing. And luckily for us, we're all chatterboxes, so the dynamic comes very easily.
Well, it's seamless if you listen to it. And in in the interest of what you brought up about the last episode, really wish that Rishi was here right now because I would love for you to tell him why you shouldn't whistle at night.
Oh my God! Wow, you've already caught up. So in the last episode, Krishna was talking about how the most important moment of your life is the time of death, actually. And I'll tell you why. The time of death, whatever you think about, according to Bhakti Yoga philosophy, according to Krishna, whatever you think about the moment before you die, that is the form that you achieve in your next life. Right? Think about that for a
Mm-hmm.
second, right? If you are super attached to your wife at the end of your life, that is the form that you will be born in a woman's body. If you're a super attached, I always bring this example of like the Queen of England was super attached to her corgis, right? If her
Right.
last moment of death, she thought about one of her corgis, she will become one of those corgis in her next life. So the point is like whatever you think about, whatever you're attached to at the moment of death, that is your next form in your next life. And so Krishna was talking about if you think about your grandpa, you get to spend time with your grandpa. And we talked about ghosts. Like there was this, like if you worship ghosts and that type of stuff, you also like will live among the ghosts. And so we were talking about all these ghost stories on the podcast for a moment. And it but essentially Shamli said that there's like this old wives' tale in Indian culture where it's like if you whistle at nighttime, you actually break the third
The
like the
ether.
third
Yeah.
yeah, the ether, right? There's a hole
Yeah.
in the ether where the ghosts actually can hear and they can come you're basically calling the ghost at nighttime when you whistle, which is very, very interesting. But see, it's interesting stuff because we talk about all the stuff that is like relatable to what's happening in modern life. And Priya's seen ghosts, and I like Shamli has seen ghosts, and it's like, oh, Krishna is actually talking about ghosts in this verse. And so it's there's never an episode where we talk about the same thing a lot. It's always just random things because the Gita is filled with all these beautiful things, and it keeps it very entertaining. And so hopefully that part entertained you as well.
And that's what it's all about, is about bringing something as ancient as the Bhagavad Gita to life and bringing it to the people. And all three of you do that beautifully. And the reason I brought that up is because for those of you who don't know, Rishi really does have a fascination with ghosts and ghost stories. So I wanted to throw that out. So listen, y'all, if you tap into Modern Yogi, you will not only hear about the Bhagavad Gita, you'll learn a lot of other interesting facts as well.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you have favorite episodes that you want to recommend for our listeners.
You know, one of my favorites actually is the episode, and I'll find the number for you, but where we all three of us talk about how we met our mentors or our gurus, because I think in life it's so important to have these people that hold you accountable and teach you, because none of us know everything, you know what I mean? And so meeting our spiritual teachers or our gurus, that episode, we just did a whole episode where we just talked about the stories of how we met our spiritual teachers and why we were so attracted to them. And so that's a really, really great episode. I'll find the number for you in a little bit, but that's one of my favorites that I can just remember off the top of my head.
I think that this podcast is really important because I think, especially in America, a lot of people are really struggling to find spirituality and find connection in life right now. I think there is a lot of change happening. It is off-putting. People are nervous, they're scared. And I just want you to talk a little bit about how things like the Gita can offer solace in moments like this. And do you feel like this is true? Like in America, there is a crisis of spirituality.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to talk about the tenets of what the Bhagavad Gita actually talks about and how that helps with keeping the mind in a happier place, not in a happier, in a more peaceful place. Because when you turn on the news, you see everything that's going on, and a normal person would just get scared. I mean, it is a very scary place, this world sometimes. And so the main tenets of the Gita talk about things like meditation, talking about things like how to, no matter what is happening in your life, how to keep your mind from being disturbed either way, right? It also talks about the intricacies of karma and how karma works, and that sometimes is hard for people to understand because karma works over lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. I always say this one analogy of like, how come there's a child born in South Sudan in a poverty-stricken life, and then there's children born to Kim Kardashian, right? You would usually look at this situation, excuse me, and think, oh my God, life is so unfair, the universe is so unfair, God is so unfair. But when you learn the intricacies of karma, you understand that things have happened in such a way to line up that person's life in full alignment according to their good and their bad deeds from a previous lifetime. It's hard to understand completely because we don't know our past lives. We don't understand. Sometimes people are given a great set of cards, and some people are given really, really difficult cards that they just have to go through life with. And so understanding the intricacies of karma and how that works, understanding not mind control, but like meditation and how to control the mind in a more peaceful manner, understanding why bad things happen to good people and vice versa. I think there's so many lessons to extract from the Gita that have to do with two of those main things, is like understanding how our mind works and understanding how karma works. And when you really figure out those two topics, and they're really, really big, intricate topics, it helps you understand how things happen in this world, why they happen, and it gives you some sort of context as to the karmic nature of why these things happen. And it hurts sometimes because there's not a lot that we can do about a lot of these things, but we can have sympathy and compassion, and we can pray, and we can provide as much energy and love as much as our heart can give during these times, but
Yeah.
also understanding that learning how to make sure our mind doesn't waver when we hear of all of these things, that is also important for our own mental health as well. And so the Gita teaches all of those things, and it's helped me a lot dealing with listening
Mhm.
to the news. It still doesn't make it easy because it's hard out there, but it does give a lot of tools to help you manage during these times.
Wonderful. And since you brought these things up, I just want to touch a little bit on a few of the things that you mentioned. First of all, karma, which is a philosophy of for every action, there is reaction. So
Yes.
what we do to others essentially gets mirrored back to us. And
Mhm.
I want to point out that there are three types of karma, correct? There is the good karma for good deeds that you have done and the good things come back to you. For instance, George Harrison might have, had a lot of good deeds he did in a previous life because he had a very wonderful, opulent life, him and the other Beatles in that incarnation.
Mhm.
And, there is negative karma. So anything that we do, which is hurtful, gets reflected back to us. And then
Mhm.
there is sort of this neutral karma,
Mhm.
correct?
Yeah, it's
Um,
called akarma.
karma, so lack of.
Mhm.
So, in other words, for instance, the way to avoid karma in a certain instance is when you eat something, you offer it the first taste to the higher power, to Krishna
Mhm.
first. And that essentially neutralizes any karma from the eating of the food, because eating food is on some level destructive, even
Oh,
if it's only to plants, and not to animals. It is a life form that you're consuming. So,
absolutely. Yeah. And just to break that down a little bit, in Hinduism, Buddhism, we have this notion of reincarnation and liberation, right? And so we have
that was
been
my other
probably.
point.
Oh yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, that was the other point I wanted to bring up is, in the big scheme of things, we have to talk about this philosophy of reincarnation, because in the Christian tradition, there is a belief that there is only one life.
Mm-hmm.
And
YOLO.
that becomes complicated because people think they've got one instance in which to get it all right, which, if you look at the Vedic philosophy, I believe that on average, they say a soul takes about 1,000,000 years of incarnation in which to reach perfection. We don't have enough time in a lifetime to get perfect on everything.
Yeah.
So the Vedic philosophy really says we are in this cycle of birth and death, and that we reincarnate. And so the karma that we're experiencing in a specific incarnation isn't from this incarnation, it's from previous ones. So
Correct.
there's that big picture piece of that you were bringing out, why is this happening to, kids in Palestine right now, or any of these
Mhm.
awful things? And it's because in the big spectrum of their existence, they're having to learn these lessons as they had done to others in a previous existence. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're kind of stuck in this rat race of birth and death and birth and death and birth and death, and we're just it's like, and karma is like Newton's third law of physics, right? Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and we will continue to get the reactions of our good and bad deeds for forever, as long as we have them, right? Think of karma as like a bank account, right? Good actions breed more good things, bad actions give you negative things. But what's great about spirituality gives you a little bit of something called, we just talked about, akarma. And when you do more spiritual things like offering your food or chanting or meditating or finding your own way to God in some way, those actions are actually considered akarma. And that
Mm.
burns both good and bad karma. And the only way to get out of this cycle of reincarnation is to have zero sum game, like break even karmically. And the only way to do that is through our karmic activities that burn both good and bad karma, so you don't have to come back and reincarnate over and over again.
Beautiful. So well said. You nailed it. And I'm so glad we could really touch on these two topics so that it can make more sense to listeners, because for people who come from Judeo-Christian backgrounds, this may not be as clear
Right.
for them. And so, you do have to invite in that there are other philosophies that can describe in more totality the human existence. And so I hope people can hold space for that.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and I
And
think your podcast, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, I having an open mind to these things is very, very important because at the end of the day, this is just what I believe in, right? And it's worked for me, and it's worked for answering my questions. But whatever works for you and answering your questions, uh, uh, that works for other people. And so I just want to, for Bhakti Yoga philosophy, just keep an open mind to these things, because um, anything that helps to answer those questions and works for you is the most perfect path.
So beautiful. All right. So let's talk about comedy. Comedy has been a thing for you for some time. And how did you stumble upon this? Like what was your big motivation?
So this was right after I graduated. I went to a really prestigious business school surrounded by geniuses who were going into finance and auditing and accounting, and I was not one of those geniuses. I picked marketing because I thought it would be fun colors and pretty fonts and stuff like that. And so as soon as I graduated from that business school, I ended up in a cubicle 9 to 5 job with gray walls, and I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe that this is my life now. And so I kind of got into a weird funk where I was like, what is the point of life? And so I was doing some research. One of my best friends, Irene, always said, you should get into stand up. And I was like, what, really? And I found this advertisement in the paper. This was a while ago. Now that I say that, the paper. But I found this advertisement for like comedy classes at this facility called Second City. And I was like, why not? It was like a 3-month course, and at the end of the 3 months, your graduation or your exam is you have to perform in front of a live audience. And I was like, this is cool. Let's do this. I was the only girl in that class. It was 15 straight white men and one little Indian girl in that class. That was it. That was my
And you
introduction.
killed it, I bet.
And it was great. It ended up, and so we got to the graduation class, and they put me last on the lineup. It's a room filled with people, and there was probably like 200 people in that room, and I had never done stand-up comedy ever before. I think I was about 20, 21 years old, in front of a room full of people. I have never, Sarah, never been more nervous in my life. I was like, this is the stupidest idea I've ever had. Why did I do this? I feel like I'm gonna throw up. I'm so nauseous. But the moment they called me up on stage, please welcome to stage Aastha Lal. And then like I went up, I grabbed the microphone, and I told my first joke, and I heard my first bit of laughter. Every bone in my body just like unclenched, and there was so much tension that was released, and it was the most euphoric feeling in the world. And I was like, in that moment, I remember saying to myself, this is what I have to do for the rest of my life. Like, I remember that moment of just relief and happiness and euphoria, where I was like, oh my God, something that I wrote, 200 people are laughing at. This is amazing. And so that was the moment where I was like, I need to keep doing this because I feel great doing it. I love making people laugh. It's been in my character since I was like 5 years old, and so this is who I am, and this is what I have to pursue. And so that's where it started.
That's so beautiful. And I hope this is a lesson to everybody out there of the power of following your heart and how it feels when you have that moment. Thank you for really describing that moment so beautifully. I'm wondering how your comedy helped you on this little thing called The Amazing Race.
So my fiance, my partner, and I got cast on the last season 34 of The Amazing Race. And if you want to check it out, please do. You don't have to watch a lot of episodes. You just have to watch the first one, because we got eliminated first because we're terrible. And usually, if you've ever seen The Amazing Race, the people that get eliminated first are usually the people over 75 years old. You know what I mean? It's usually like the old people that are like, oh my God, man, I'm so glad I had a good chance to run this race during my retirement years. Everyone thinks, like, usually statistically, the old people are the first people to get eliminated on this race, not two lesbians in their 30s. You know what I mean? And so that has been something that was really, really important for me to understand, is that you have to laugh at things in life, because for most people, getting eliminated first on a national reality show would be devastating. And yes, it was for a couple hours for us, but we also, I mean, you have to laugh at things in life, because at the end of the day, the funniest thing that could ever happen to a comedian on a reality show is to get deeply embarrassed. And honestly, it really helped my comedy career. So I think when anything bad happens in life, it's like you have to learn to see what lessons we can learn from it, and also to laugh at it, because if we're not laughing, we're crying, and I'd rather choose to live a life of laughter than the latter.
And it works so well. And for those of you who haven't seen the episode, what is so beautiful about this episode is that Asta, the genius that she is using the show as her platform to tell jokes. And that's why her and her partner showed up late to the first finish line, is because Asta was so busy just entertaining and cracking jokes to make everyone smile that that they lost. But how endearing. And I think it gave you a platform and a springboard for your comedy. So in the end, it was a blessing.
You watched it, Sarah. You watched it. That's amazing.
You have no idea. I'm such a fangirl of yours. And so it's certainly my pleasure. I've had the opportunity and the pleasure of watching Asta do some comedy live. You did a show, I don't know, about a year ago in your condo. You just brought in a bunch of chairs, had a bunch of friends and everything come, and you just, because of your love of comedy, decided to tell some jokes. And I love your AastaLal.com joke. It's hilarious. There's so many pearls. If you follow her on Instagram, what's your Instagram, by the way?
Oh, it's at Aastha.Lal.
Yes. So please tune in. She's got a lot of incredible clips, and including from that show. There was a pretty special piece at the end of the show, if you would like to share about it. You had never really talked about this topic in your comedy before, and you chose to that night. And I do remember we kind of had a little moment where we engaged and saw each other. You looked into the crowd, and wondering if you want to share about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was a cute show. We put like 80 chairs in my tiny apartment, and I was like headlining a show. I did a 60-minute show. And I'd been doing comedy for a really long time, but for the longest time I had been writing for the audience, and I'd be writing for what I think the audience would love to hear about. And in my last couple headlining shows, I started to change that, and I started to write about the things that I cared about and the things that were important to me. For a majority of my comedy career, I would go out to these clubs. I would do multiple shows every single week, and the lineup would always be, majority straight white men and then one little Indian girl. And that was the narrative of a lot of these stories. They were a narrative from a certain viewpoint. And yes, I love straight white men. They're great, fantastic. However, in comedy, they're oversaturated. That narrative is so oversaturated. And so I decided to write shows that talk about things from my perspective, about who I am and my own identity, growing up in South Asian household. And so I started to talk about things that matter to me. And I talk about like kind of like serious topics, but I try to do it in a funny way. I talk about everything from toxic masculinity in South Asian households, to Indian aunties, to sexual assault, to growing up with doubles, what is it when you compare, like being compared to my brother growing up, and like the double-sided nature of how that works, and just like a lot of things that South Asian women deal with. And what was really special about the show that you went to was that was the first time I talked about being gay on stage. And that was something that I was so scared of talking about for the 14 years that I've been doing comedy. You know what I mean? And it on that last year, I was like, you know what, screw it. I this is who I am. This is my identity. It's taken me so long to come out of the closet. And now it's time to come out of the closet on stage too, because I will never be the comedian that I want to be unless I'm truly authentic with my audience and talking about real things that matter. And I think it's important to share those narratives, because you don't get to hear a lot of those. And if I can inspire someone else who's a queer South Asian girl who is dealing with like being queer, then why not? Because I do have a voice and I do have a platform, but I need to be courageous enough to own that voice.
And let me tell you, everybody, I could sense the gravity of what you were sharing in that moment, Asta, but also I want to talk about the love and support and applause that you got in that moment as well. And I think that is so indicative of the conscious journey of having the faith to step forward authentically into the full scope of our essence and let ourselves be seen. And you did
Yeah.
it. And it was just such a moment. And, as someone who myself is LGBT and coming from a conservative background, growing up very Catholic, I know what that journey is like. And I understood, as a viewer, like what a big moment that was for you. And I was so proud of you in that moment. So congratulations again.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing that moment with me. Like, I was teary-eyed when I was talking about it, and I saw your eyes too, and they were glimmering, and I was like, yeah, she gets it, and I really appreciate it, because it was a huge moment. The first time I talked about being gay on stage, it was a big moment, and I really appreciate you being there for that and realizing the gravity of that moment.
Yeah, and I think there's just such an elegance in the way that you balance this very traditional background with, um, you know, being non-traditional in a lot of ways. And to me, that truly embodies the idea of a modern yogi. So I think, if anything, the title of your podcast is so spot on. And I honor you for that.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate you.
You also spent some time working with Jay Shetty. I wondered if you could talk about what that experience was like, and maybe talk a little bit about who Jay is. I mean, he's huge as far as an influencer, and he had an interesting background as well, didn't he?
Yeah, he comes from a bhakti yoga philosophy as well, but I worked for him for 3 years, and let me tell you, this man is a visionary. This man knows exactly what the world needs, and he's helping the world, find their passion, find their growth, find out how to stabilize their mind through good times and bad times. He's also a student of the Gita. And so if you read any of his books, he mentions the Bhagavad Gita multiple times. He is a visionary, and just working for him personally for 3 years, he's also one of the funniest people that I know. He doesn't come across
Oh,
very
cool.
funny in a lot of his videos, but he's a jokester and he likes to joke. And I saw a very different side to his personality. He's very lighthearted. He doesn't take a lot of things too seriously. And I think he's such an incredible soul with, and he knows the mission that he's on, and he's trying to help as many people and serve as many people as possible. And I was in awe of him the 3 years that I did work for him.
What a great opportunity. And just to give some background to everybody listening, Jay, I guess you would say he's a podcaster, he is an author, he is a life coach, he is all these things, and he's been massively successful. And I believe he has recently put out a life coach training program where his very lofty goal is to transform the lives of 1 billion people. And if you don't know the math, there's about 8 billion people on the earth right now. So it's no small undertaking to change 1 out of every 8 people on the planet.
Yeah.
But I think there's a really big picture thought there, in that if people are thriving and happy in their lives, what that does on an energetic level to lift the vibration of all of humanity. And so to me, that's a beautiful thought. And when you said visionary, I think that nails it right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
What he's trying to do.
Yeah, he's like something else, and I think he can accomplish that goal because his intention is in the right place. His heart is in the right place. He doesn't care about the accolades. He doesn't care about the recognition. He actually cares about this word in Sanskrit we call seva, which is to serve. And he embodies that. And I've seen it day in and day out. And so if his goal is to serve and serve with love, I feel like he can accomplish anything he puts his mind to.
Right. And the other aspect of seva is that it's selfless service, is that it's just about like doing it for the sake of doing good, for the good of doing good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Selfless service. Yeah.
Perfect. Asta, is there any other things you want to add? I mean, this is your chance to have a platform and just tell people more about modern yogi and what you're about and what you want to share and how you want to impact the world.
Yeah, I mean, please check out the Modern Yogi podcast. If the Bhagavad Gita is something that you're interested in, or if you've never heard it and you want to have a fresh perspective on a really, really ancient text, please try the first couple episodes of the Modern Yogi podcast. I promise you'll laugh, you'll learn, and it'll be a whole new dimension that's opened up. So I invite you with an open mind and an open heart to check out the Modern Yogi podcast. Please also follow me on Instagram. I'm writing my next show now, Sarah, and I'm trying to infuse more consciousness and more spirituality in a funny environment. Yes, there will still be diarrhea jokes, but they'll still be very conscious diarrhea jokes. You know what I mean? So I'm trying to infuse the two things that I love the most in this world, and I'm trying to write a show that actually can really impact a lot of people. And so hopefully you'll check me out on Instagram, and hopefully I'll be on Netflix in a couple years too. We'll see.
And we are waiting for that moment and cannot wait. I just want to add a little note to everybody. As someone who I have myself gone through the Bhagavad Gita, I had a guru to guide me through it. We read it together and really dissected the verses. I just want to say what an opportunity it is that the Modern Yogi podcast exists and that it is run by three incredible, funny, beautiful young hosts who can really break it down for you in a way that is easily digestible. And it is just such a gift to take this incredible vessel of ancient knowledge and just basically they're giving you a gift. So it can really help and transform your life. And as you know, here at this podcast, we're all about helping your consciousness grow and expand and transform. So in closing, I just want to thank everybody for listening. Aastha Lal, you know that I am a huge fan and I love you to death. Thank you so much for being our guest today. And follow her on all of the things that we're going to list below the episode and stay tuned for more. We'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Sarah.